Is there sound now? Someone fiddled with my equipment. Ah, dear. Let me just double check here. And hold on a second. Oh, I think we have sound now. Okay, now we have sound. All right, so I'll have to try and remember to trim the video, but if you've been patiently watching up to this point on YouTube, hooray for you. Okay, so luckily now we're getting into the really meaty bits, and the rest was preamble, and people can read the slides and we'll be good. So hell, heaven, we usually think of these in ways that are very heavily influenced by Western culture, in particular Christianity. But pop culture as well has left its mark on these words. And that means that they're not helpful. And Judaism has their own words. So Gehenna and Gehinnom are not hell, but they are used as a place for suffering. Now, why are they used as a place for suffering? Well, the valley of Hinnom, which literally in Hebrew is Ge Ben Hinnom, Gehinnom, right? That's the Hebrew word for the valley of Hinnom. This was a valley that's near Jerusalem. And in that valley, people would go through the rites of Molech, which was a way of burning your children to a pagan god, making them pass through fire is the text that's used. And that became synonymous. It became equal to a place of pain, of suffering that was caused by evil. And so when we talk about an experience of punishment, the term Gehenna or Gehinnom is the word that is usually used in Jewish writing. It doesn't mean actually that valley. It doesn't mean that, the geographical coordinates of the valley near Jerusalem is where hell is. It just means they took a word that, or a place name that to them symbolized suffering and pain caused by evil, and they just use it as a stand-in word for an idea of what it means to be punished. Was that a question, or are you just scratching your head?
I'm scratching my head.
Okay. Okay. So when I say Gehenna, when I say Gehinnom, think of it as the idea of a place of punishment. But again, remember, in the afterlife, no bodies, right? No physical form. So we're not talking about literal rivers of fire or literal people with pitchforks and all of that. We'll get back to what we do mean by the suffering, but let's take care of how we go there and who goes there and why. Okay, so lots of words. This is a section from Talmud. You're going to see all the way back in the days of Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai, there was already disagreement about some of this. The house of Shammai, they say there will be three groups on the day of judgment. There will be the thoroughly righteous, that is the people who are perfect, 100% good, and the thoroughly wicked, those are the really evil ones, the 100% bad, and the in-betweeners. And that is pretty much everybody else. like 90% of the human race is in between. They've got some good and some bad. There's a mix. Got it? All right. The thoroughly righteous are immediately inscribed and sealed for eternal life. Boom. If you want, straight to Olam Haba, straight to heaven. We'll come back to that term in a bit. It's automatic, right? They've never done anything wrong. Their life has always been 100% good. They've got no debts left over from their mistakes. They are on the fast plane straight off.
How is that possible, though? Don't mean that literally, that they've never done anything wrong, right?
Okay. So good question. It's not that they have never done anything wrong, but any wrong that they have done, they have fixed, right? So when we talk about the holidays of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur in particular, we talk about the concept of tshuva, of doing repentance. If you've done something wrong, you can fix it. So you can imagine that there might be a person who's made mistakes in their life. Maybe they're a good person and they don't make a lot of mistakes, but the mistakes they made, maybe they lost their temper and insulted somebody. Maybe they forgot to pay something when they walked out the store. When they realize it, they fix their mistakes. And that means that they are perfectly righteous. Right? So being perfectly righteous in Judaism doesn't mean you never made a mistake. It means any mistake you made, you fixed.
So,
Now, it's still very hard.
that's Teshuvah, right?
Teshuvah, exactly, exactly. Okay, so the thoroughly wicked, the ones that are 100% bad, have never done a good thing in their life. You know, they were just from the beginning rotten. They are inscribed and sealed for Gehenna, Gehinnom, as it is written, and many of those who sleep in the dust shall awake, some to eternal life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. In-betweeners, on the other hand, go down to Gehenna. They cry out and they rise, as it is written in Zechariah, and I will put this third into the fire and refine them, as one refines silver, and test them as gold is tested. They will call on my name, and I will answer them. And concerning this group, Hannah, that's to say Samuel's mother, said, the Lord kills and brings to life. He brings down to Sheol, and he raises up. So Sheol is another old Hebrew word meaning the afterlife, and that's how it's being used here. So Beit Shammai, they're very clear, very strict. If you are 100% good, boom, fast playing. If you are 100% bad, you go down and you stay down. And if you are in between, you are punished. And once your punishment is done, then you go on. The reason why they're introducing this idea is that, like I said, it's justice. If you did something wrong, but you've never been punished for it, and you never did tshuva to fix it, then that needs to be corrected before you move forward in the next state of existence. Now, the house of Hillel, they disagree. And they said, but God, who abounds in mercy, leans towards mercy. And concerning them, David said, I love the Lord because he has heard my voice and my supplications. And concerning them, David stated the whole passage, the Lord preserves the simple. When I was brought low, he saved me. So what the house of Hillel is trying to say here is, no, it's not that bad. God is willing to be merciful and compassionate to everybody in order to prevent any of the worst effects that are happening here. Now, still going to be punishment for things that are left over, but it's not as bad as this makes it sound. Now, the underlying concept here is a bit like a rubber band. So imagine a rubber band, right? You have a rubber band in your hand, and you have the hand over here, and you grab part of the rubber band and you start pulling it. If I pull the rubber band here and let go, what happens? If I pull the rubber band here and let go, what happens? Yeah, it's going to hit a lot more. This is a way to think about what is happening here. If I'm living my life, and this is God, and I'm moving myself away from God, away from what God wants, away from the laws, away from a good life, away from filling my soul with what's right, when I am released from this world, I'm going to come back spiritually, because now I don't have the anchor that I've allowed to confuse myself with. I'm going to come back to my natural state. And the natural state of the soul is one of goodness. The soul is tahor, is pure. And when the soul comes back to where it should be, the snapback is going to be uncomfortable. Right? The spirit itself, the soul itself, is going to say, how could I have lived like this? It will feel spiritual pain. Again, not people poking you. It will feel the spiritual pain as it realizes how badly it messed up its life. When we're living, people who are very, very bad, usually they can convince themselves that they're not so bad. Or maybe that what they're doing is even right. You know, the tyrants of the world, they all think they're heroes. When they leave this world, they can't trick themselves anymore. No more delusions, no more lies. They will stand in front of Dayan Ha'emet, the true judge, and they will judge themselves truly when they are in God's presence and recognize their mistake. And that snapback is what we are describing here as punishment. And their soul will cry out, because their soul will say, how could I have lived like this? How could I have made those mistakes? All right. More. Israelite wrongdoers and Gentile wrongdoers who follow their bodies. This is a term that's used in the Talmud to mean that you're sinning because you just couldn't control your urges. Right? You saw a pretty girl and you couldn't help yourself. You saw a pretty cheeseburger and you couldn't help yourself. You saw money and you couldn't help yourself. It was just, you let your impulse get the best of you, right? Those, they go down to Gehenna. They are judged there for 12 months. And after 12 months, the body is consumed, the soul is burned, and a wind scatters them under the feet of the righteous. As it says in Malachi, you shall tread down the wicked, for they will be ashes under the soles of your feet. So the idea here is that, yes, there will be this period of punishment for those kinds of mistakes. But the sectarians, the informers, the heretics, the ones who denied the Torah, who denied the resurrection of the dead, who separated themselves from the ways of the community, or who tyrannized the land of the living, who were like tyrants that were, mean and nasty, and who sinned and caused many others to sin, like Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, and his associates. They go down to Gehenna and are judged there for generations, meaning a much longer period of punishment. As it says in Isaiah, this is the last chapter, and they shall go forth and look on the dead bodies of the men who have rebelled against me. For their worm shall not die, their fire shall not be quenched. In the second paragraph, what the Talmud is trying to tell us is that there are some people who do wrong because they like doing wrong. Right? There are some people who do wrong because they want the money, they want the girl, they want the food. And there are other people who do wrong because they want to be wrong. They want to fight against God. They want to choose a bad path, not just they want the money. And those people have a different layer of spiritual fixing that needs to happen, because they have not just followed their instincts, they twisted themselves 180 degrees away from God. All right, now all of this we have to try and understand. When we're talking about 12 months of punishment, or generations of punishment, or everlasting punishment, what are we talking about here? Well, first of all, in many other texts, when they talk about the time in Gehenna or Gehinnom, they seem to be using it as a way to emphasize sin. There's a section in Bava Metzia that says, if you murder someone, if you commit adultery, or you embarrass somebody, you go down to Gehenna and you never come up. Like, wait a minute. If I embarrass someone, I am like forever judged? This is clearly not meant as being a literal script for what will happen to you after you die. This means really, 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 you should think about embarrassing someone as being a terrible thing to do. You should avoid it the same way that you would avoid murdering someone or committing adultery. It's a form of hyperbole, we would say. And we can reinforce that because we know in other parts, for example, in Sanhedrin, they point out certain specific individuals that are going to be punished. But that piece would contradict this piece. They don't fit together because each section is just using it as a way of trying to show us how serious different problems can be. Plus, we have to remember there is a difference between eternal punishment and failing to reach Olam Haba, the world to come, which is the usual world, or the usual word that we use for heaven, which is where we're going to go in just a second. But I want questions, if there's any questions so far. Yes?
The Torah says, I created the evil inclination, I created the Torah's spice.
Right.
If he created the evil inclination and there's people, like he was saying, righteous, that everything comes from the evil.
Right.
And then we have Torah in order
to correct that.
To correct. I don't know how to explain that because it's the question would be, isn't it we don't need the hunger in order to be fulfilled? We don't need to have
like, aren't they necessary both?
Yes.
We need as much the night in order to receive the day.
Right. So we definitely, there's a whole nother discussion in the Talmud about the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, these desires that can lead us down the wrong direction. And the ones that you noticed on the last slide were the weaker of the problems, right? Those were not the bigger problems. Those were the smaller ones. There's a whole section of the Talmud that says, yes, we need a little bit of that, right? We do need to want something. I need to want to protect myself. I need to want a family. I need to want to have food. those kinds of desires are perfectly normal and natural. Those are what God created in us. But when you let them go and control your life, that's where God says, I gave you an urge that you would want to get married and want to have children. Absolutely. But you should be able to stop with your family and not have that urge with everybody you meet at the bar that night. I gave you an urge that you should want to work and have money so that you can have a nice home and protect yourself, protect your family, have enough food. But I didn't give you the urge to go out and steal millions of dollars from poor people. That is where you let the urge take you beyond what God had given us, what God is using healthily. Right? So there are healthy urges, but those same urges, if you turn them up too far, become very unhealthy. And the Torah tries to help us keep the dial where it should be. And that's what we're talking about in this case. So yes, we're not trying to say you get rid of all your urges and get rid of all of those desires, get rid of the body. No, that's not the idea. Right? It's not living in a cave somewhere just eating bread and water. That's not the idea. But the idea is you don't follow those urges into the worst situations. You have to keep control.
Because for me, it's not important what I do on the externality, because I can control myself not to do nothing unfair, but even feeling it inside, that's what really would make me concerned. That's what I was saying. We need those kind of nature deviation in order for us to keep working and try to go above them.
Yes, and that there is another level of learning and of spiritual guidance when we're talking about our feelings, not just our actions. But the Torah always emphasizes the action is what we need to control first. And you may be able to control your actions, but I know a few billion people in the world who aren't good at controlling their actions, at least not 100% of the time. And that's really what the emphasis is on. Because if we can control our actions first, then everything becomes better. And then controlling our spirit becomes even easier. But if we miss that first step, then we're in trouble.
Normally the people who want to convert in religion is because they want to become a better person.
That's absolutely right. And that's, again, goes back to our first question of why God gave us the Torah in the first place.
So since it takes a whole year, I guess that has to do with the fact that once you die, you're released from your religion. Because I guess if it takes a year, that means you can no longer participate in Yom Kippur, the atonement, and atone before the 12 months is up.
Correct. Well, I mean, while you're dead. Yes,
right.
Exactly.
No, all right.
And it happens to be also from that statement that the practice of saying Kaddish developed as saying Kaddish for the first year after a parent dies. But that's a whole nother discussion about mourning practices. Yes.
Somewhere in the Cedar, it said, uncertain are the rewards for those who practice the mitzvah, so they may perform them in fidelity.
Right. That God didn't give us a list of if you do this mitzvah, you get this reward. If you do this mitzvah, you get this reward, because it's not supposed to be a game. We're not supposed to sit and figure out, the most efficient way to do the mitzvahs to get the biggest payoff, because we're supposed to be doing the mitzvah for their own sake. Right.
I read that to mean you might do the mitzvah and get absolutely nothing in return.
It's not nothing,
well,
but
nothing.
It's more like those those machines you can see where they have like little prizes, and you put money in the machine and you get a prize out, but you don't know what prize, right? But you will get a prize, and some of the prizes are amazing, and some of the prizes are nice. And the mitzvahs are like that, right? None of them are pointless. There's nothing that is zero in terms of its benefit. But you may think, this mitzvah is the most important mitzvah in the whole world, so I'm going to do this one and I'm going to ignore that one. That's what you're not supposed to do. You don't try to think, this one's more important than this one, so I can ignore it because I did this one twice. That kind of math doesn't work. All right, got to plow on because we're hitting the clock. Life after death. What do we mean? Well, this actually has the most texts throughout the Tanakh that give clear support that there is definitely life beyond this existence. But it's not crystal clear what that life means. Is that life only spiritual? Is that life physical and spiritual at different times? Let's look at the texts first. So, for example, in Genesis, this was the total span of Abraham's life, 175 years, and Abraham breathed his last, dying at a good ripe age, old and contented, and he was gathered to his kin. He was taken to his family. All right. This is impossible physically. Right? Where was Abraham born? He was born in Ur. Right? Abraham's whole early life was traveling, and literally God told him, Lech lecha, leave the land of your family. So when he was buried in Machpelah, in Hebron, in the land of Israel, he was not being buried next to his father. That is one thing we know 100% true. So when we say that he is gathered to his family, that he is gathered to his father when he died, we must be talking about spiritually, that he is being gathered. It isn't physically, which means it must be understood a different way. Onward, Ishmael, these are the years of Ishmael, 137. When he breathed his last, he was gathered to his kin. But we know Ishmael was not buried with Abraham. So he wasn't buried with his father. So how could they be together? They can be together spiritually, even if they weren't together physically when they're dead. More. But now that he is dead, this is King David talking about when one of his children, his first child from Bathsheba and himself was dying. He says, now that my child is dead, why should I go on fasting? Can I bring him back again? I will go to him, but he will not return to me. How will he go to his dead child? When he dies, he will join his child's spirit. Right? They will be united after life. Ecclesiastes says it more generally. The dust returns to the earth as it was. That means our body, which is made of Adamah, made of the earth, the soil, the dust. And the spirit returns to God who gave it. Right? Remember, God put the spirit into the body. When the body falls, the spirit comes back to God. That's that snapback. This is our anchor. When the anchor is done, we continue to return. And then just one more from the book of Samuel, a second book of Samuel. Saul and Jonathan, the lovely and pleasant their lives, even in their death, they were not divided. They were swifter than eagles. They were stronger than lions. Yeah, they were divided. I mean, Jonathan died quite young, and he died up in the north of Israel. David died much older in the city of Jerusalem. Of course, they were divided in death. The only way they weren't divided in death is if their spirits were reunited after they were dead. Good? Like I said, this is where we have plenty of evidence from the text. So what do we actually believe then? Well, this is where it gets confusing and controversial. Rabbinic Judaism basically believes that there will be, at some point, a period of bodily resurrection of all people near the end of days. That means at some point, I will get to walk on the earth again after I have been dead. What that means? Well, some say this is thought to be after the Mashiach comes and the world is perfected. This is mentioned repeatedly in rabbinic texts, and the idea of getting to live a second time is stressed in the second prayer of the Amidah, the Givurot, where we say God is Mechayeh HaMetim, that God is the one who gives life to the dead. The exact technicalities of this, where do the bodies stand up? Do the bodies stand up out of the grave, zombie movies thing? Or are the bodies going to be rebuilt in some other spot? For example, the land of Israel. This is the stuff that people get to sit and argue and discuss, but we don't have a travel book that tells us what this is going to be like. But this comes back again to the concept of Dayan Ha'emet, of God being a true and faithful judge, that when the Mashiach comes, when the world is perfected, when we've actually made the world what it was supposed to be, why should only the people who are lucky enough to be born at that moment get to experience the blessings of this world without all of the problems that it currently has? How is that fair? Well, I'm unlucky because I got born before Mashiach, so I never got to see the world the way it was supposed to be. That's like getting a free ticket to Disneyland and you go there and all the rides are closed. It's like, no, I want to go to Disneyland when everything's working. And this world is considered a gift. Right? It's not a punishment that we get to live a second time. That's the ultimate blessing that God is saying, enjoy this world and see the beauty that it should have had. All the people who died during the wars, who died from famine and diseases and other problems that we've made for ourselves over the centuries, they should get to see the world in the good version rather than just the difficult version that they had to live through.
Okay, so
There's a lot there, yeah.
well, this, okay, number one, why is it taken so literally? That's
Mhm.
number one. And number two, speaking, because you mentioned the soul level
Yes.
of things, okay? On the soul level, though, we know that this is not the only clothing
Correct.
that this part has clothed in. So what clothing is supposed to be resurrected? You know, like they can't literally mean Jasmine as you know Jasmine.
Okay, so if you mean at what point in your life, or do you mean in terms of like,
At what point?
the-
Yeah. At what point? Then?
are you
Because, I mean,
reincarnated? Are you reconstituted as a child, as an adult, as you when you died?
Right,
Though-
because it's saying these are cycles.
Yep.
At what point
Yep.
does it say, you know, because if it's literal, I'd like to see, you know, at what part of Jasmine's
And
life cycle.
that is where we still go, oh.
That's why I say
Yeah.
this can't possibly be literal, you know?
And we're going to see that within certain of the sages, for example, Rambam, he leans towards agreeing that yes, the rabbis made a big point of this in the Talmud and the Mishnah and other rabbinic teachings, but he doesn't place a great heavy emphasis on it and does say that it may be more spiritual than physical. But we'll get a little bit further in. I'm just looking at the time. I want to make sure we finish up, and then we'll have as much time for questions as we can, because I have a meeting at 7, so I've got a hard stop that I've got to work against.
Well, the only thing I was going to say, talk about how was that fair, but didn't Moses get a similar punishment when he was not allowed to enter the land of Israel?
He got a punishment, yes, but that doesn't mean that he would not deserve to have a chance to come back to the world when it was actually perfect, when it was actually the way it was supposed to be. So there's difference between not getting everything you want right now and not getting everything that you deserve ever. And those, you know, he didn't deserve to enter the land of Israel at that time. That doesn't mean that he never deserves to live in a world when things are good. Just
So does this say that does Judaism believe in incarnations?
we're going to get to that. That's in one of my slides.
Okay.
All right, so let's hear a little bit from Rambam. So in the world to come, Olam Haba, there is nothing corporeal. That means nothing physical, right? No material substance, no atoms, no molecules, no stuff. There are only the souls of the righteous without bodies, like the ministering angels. The same way angels don't have bodies, but they still exist. We will exist. The righteous attain to a knowledge and realization of truth concerning God, to which they had not attained while they were in the murky and lowly body. Right? It's like living in the middle of Orlando. If you wanted to study the stars, you'd be able to learn a little. Move out to the Atacama Desert in South America, where there is no smog, there are no clouds, and there's no street lights to blind you, and then you can see the glory of heaven. So too, we will take with us what we have learned, what our soul has been enriched from this world to the next, and then it will be further amplified. It'll be multiplied in the next world, and it'll be done so without the lens of this clothing, I think was the term you used. Okay, so what do we mean when we say Olam Haba, the world to come? Well, it depends, because our sages were not always in agreement about what they meant with the word Olam Haba. That is to say, some people, when they talk about Olam Haba, they mean this world after Mashiach has come. You know, this is the world now, and this is the world that is coming. And the world will be better. On the other hand, some of them call the world that's coming after Mashiach comes Gan Eden, meaning the Garden of Eden, when the world is put back to that perfect status with humans being fully actualized, not just as they were before. On the other hand, sometimes when they say Gan Eden, they mean heaven. They mean the spiritual existence. So it is very confusing. And sometimes Olam Haba only means life without the body. So there is a lot of confusion because when they're using the word, they're not using it consistently, like a scientific term. They're using it to describe many different stages of the end of days because they're trying to understand what the prophets left us to put that together. So in general, Olam Haba can mean all of those things. It can mean this world after Mashiach, and it can mean the world that is purely of spiritual living. Depends what you're reading. All right, so reincarnation. Some Jewish groups have been teaching reincarnation. This is fairly recent, the last few hundred years, but there is no mention of reincarnation in Tanakh or rabbinic writings. And to be honest, and again, obviously there are Jews who disagree, I already said so, but in my opinion and the opinion of many scholars, this doesn't really fit with most of Jewish teachings. The basic concept has always been the soul has one journey, right? You get one run through life. And one of the reasons why that is so powerful is because this body cannot be rewarded and punished for the previous actions of the soul in a different body. There's a very powerful metaphor used in the Talmud where it says that the body and the soul, they're a team, and they work together in this life. And trying to pull them apart doesn't really work in this life. And yet the idea of reincarnation is that you can pull the soul out like a battery, stick it into a new body, and then punish or reward that body for what the previous team had done. That doesn't make sense in terms of justice and in terms of fairness. It'd be like saying, this player used to play for the Patriots, but he now plays for the San Diego Chargers. Poor guy. And I grew up in San Diego, so I can say that. But he still deserves the reward for being a Patriot because they won they lost the Super Bowl. They won the last Super Bowl, right? It's like, no, if he's on a different team now, he doesn't get the benefit from his old team. It doesn't work that way. Logic also, by the way, has great problems with reincarnation, just in terms of the number of souls, because there are more people alive now than there were 10 years ago, and then there were 10 years before that. And the number of new souls, right now, you would have maybe a few million people who have had human souls that have been around for the beginning. Most of the souls would have been made in the last 30, 40, 50 years. That kind of means that eventually it doesn't really work. It's not, everybody's going up. There's a few people who were the original souls, and then everybody else is brand new. And that's only going to make the world get worse and worse as there are newer and younger souls around that don't know what they're doing. And plus the fact that you have no memory of what you did in the last soul or the last life also makes it rather unfair to be then treated according to what you previously had done. There are lots of other reasons of why reincarnation got introduced into Judaism, what it's used for in terms of those groups who do believe in it, but that's all the time I really want to spend on it unless you have a specific question. Okay. But I do want to get Mashiach out. Now, Mashiach is very controversial because the texts that describe Mashiach are not 100% clear. But it is something that we absolutely want to believe and yearn for, that there will be a person that will help bring the world, and the Jewish people in particular, back into focus with God. And that means we kind of want to know more what this is. So this is taken from the section of Mishnah Torah that the Christians forced us to censor, but thankfully some groups still had the original copy, because Rambam, in his usual way, gives very clear summaries. And I recommend that you read the whole section if you get a copy, because these are just paragraphs from it. So he wants to know, how do you going to spot the Mashiach, right? How do you know him? Does he have a big M on his forehead? How do you know who's Mashiach? Because we've had lots of people who claimed to be Mashiach. Not only the Christian groups that began around Jesus, but lots of other people. There are some more recent groups that have picked people, but all throughout history we have had people who said, I'm Mashiach, or who other people said, he's Mashiach. By the way, the Mashiach just means anointed. It just means that a person has been appointed and recognized as having a special role. But really, we're talking about the Mashiach, that the person that will come at the end that will turn the whole world back towards God. So how do we spot him? Well, if a king should arise from the house of David, first criteria based off the prophets, who is versed in Torah and engaged in the commandments, as did David his forefather, in accordance with both the written and oral Torahs, and he enjoins all of Israel to follow in its ways and encourages them to repair its breaches. Right? So he is a good person, he keeps Torah, and he's helping other people to keep Torah. This message as a teacher is very important. And he fights the wars of God, meaning that he is willing and able to win against the people that want to stop that from happening. The people who are fighting against more people following a good path, he has to be able to stop them. Then we may presume that he is the Mashiach, that he is the Messiah. Now, this is only if he's actually fighting. He hasn't won yet, but if it looks like he's doing it and he looks like the right person, then we can say, you know what, he might be the Messiah. If he succeeds and he defeats the enemies and he builds the sanctuary in its proper place in Jerusalem and he gathers the dispersed of Israel, he is definitely the Messiah. Now you'll notice those are the criteria. We don't have to check, whether there is heavenly light shining down on him. He doesn't have to do miracles. He doesn't have to do any magic tricks. What he has to do is accomplish what we believe the Messiah will accomplish. And that is to bring the world back towards God and put things in better order. If he does not succeed, or if he is killed, then we know that he was not the one the Torah has promised, right? So you can have a good person who fights hard, who works hard and does good, and then he grows old and dies, or he's killed in battle, and we say, oh, okay, he is like all the other exemplary and qualified kings of the house of David. Not that there were that many that are dead. He was a good guy, and he tried hard. God set him up only to try the masses, as it says, and some of the wise will stumble, to refine among them and purify, and to make white, even to the end of the time of the end. For it is yet for the time appointed. The idea being that we have to be careful that we don't think that somebody is the Mashiach and that the end is here before it actually happens. Because when you do, you stumble, you fall. And we've had so many false messiahs in Judaism that have led hundreds or thousands of people to really bad ends because they got carried away thinking the person was the Messiah when they hadn't actually done the work yet. All right. Onward again. Nonetheless, the thoughts of the Creator of the world are beyond any man's understanding. For our ways are not his ways, and our thoughts are not his thoughts. And all the doings of Jesus of the Nazarene and that of the Ishmaelite, he's speaking about Muhammad here, who came after him, are nothing but to pave the way for the King Messiah and prepare the entire world to worship God together. As it says, for then I will turn to the peoples of pure language, that they may call upon the name of the Lord and to serve him with one consent. What he's saying here, and what he goes on to say in other passages, is that we obviously don't agree that Jesus or Muhammad were the Messiah of God, but we can see that there has been some good from both of those religions, that they have gotten rid of idolatry in many areas, that they have gotten rid of pagan practices in many places, and they've at least gotten people talking about God and referring to our understanding of God as well. Not 100%, of course, because then we'd all agree, but that has laid the groundwork for the world to get closer to the time of the Messiah than without. So it's not all bad news. And one thing that we get reminded from in the Talmud is, said Samuel, the only difference between this age and the days of the Messiah is that Israel's subjugation to the kingdoms of the world alone. As it is said, for the poor shall never cease out of the land. What he's trying to say here, by quoting Deuteronomy, is that don't expect fancy miracles and the laws of nature to change when the Messiah shows up. This is something that Rambam agrees on, as he says, do not presume that in the Messianic era that any facet of the world's nature will change, or there will be innovations in the work of creation. Rather, the world will continue according to its pattern. There's still going to be rain, there's still going to be sun, there's still going to be trees, there's still going to be birds. those things will happen. And although Isaiah states the wolf will dwell with the lamb and the leopard will lie down with the young goat, these words are a metaphor and a parable. Do not actually expect to see wolves and lambs sitting down together and just chilling. That's the poetry, not literal. By the way, I saw once a TV show where there was a preacher who was proving that this was literally true by having an old circus lion that they brought on and a lamb that somebody was holding next to it, and they had a bucket full of meat that they kept throwing to the lion while he was preaching. And when the meat ran out, they moved the lion away and then continued. It's like that's not what's happening here, right? This is a metaphor, and what does it mean? The interpretation of the prophecy is as follows: Israel will dwell securely together with the wicked Gentiles who are likened to a wolf or a leopard. Meaning, not that they will still be wicked, but they will have changed from the way they had been wicked when they were oppressing and attacking and killing us. Now, they and we will live together, and there will not be the hate and the strife and the violence and all of the war. As it is said in the prophecy of Jeremiah, a wolf from the wilderness shall spoil them, and a leopard will stalk their cities. Right? Do you really believe there was an actual leopard hunting the city? That would be a really big cat. They will all return to the true faith and no longer steal or destroy. Rather, they will eat permitted food at peace with Israel. As Isaiah 11:7 states, the lion will eat straw like an ox. Again, not saying that lions are actually eating straws, but they are going to be eating things that are not nasty. All right, just to finish off then, the Mashiach, one more section from Rambam. There are some sages who say that Elijah's coming will precede the coming of Mashiach. All these matters cannot be definitely known by man until they occur. Right? We'll know the Messiah and we'll know the order of these events when they actually happen, because they are undefined in the prophet's words, which is what we said, talked about at the beginning. And even the wise men have no established tradition regarding these matters except their own interpretation of the verses. Therefore, there is controversy among them regarding these matters. Regardless of the debate concerning these questions, neither the order of the occurrence of these events or the precise detail are among the fundamental principles of the faith. A person should not occupy himself with the agadot, those are the stories and the philosophy, and the homiletics, the other teachings concerning these and similar matters, nor should he consider them as essentials, meaning it's not if you misunderstand one of these, you're in trouble. If you misunderstand how to do Shabbat, you need to fix that. If you're not sure about what's happening when the Messiah comes, that's okay. As long as you don't go running after the wrong person, you're fine. And study of them will neither bring a fear or love of God. Similarly, one should not try to determine the appointed time of Mashiach's coming. Don't sit around saying the Messiah is going to come next month, the Messiah is going to come next year, the Messiah is coming in 10 years. Doing that is actually something the Talmud forbids, but it leads to disaster. Because either you're going to say it's too soon, and when it doesn't happen, everyone is going to be disappointed, or you're going to say it's too far, and everyone's going to give up hope, saying, "Oh, if it's another 1,000 years, I can't live another 1,000 years with the world not having the Messiah." Either way, it's bad news. And just a reminder at the very end, he adds, in that era, there will be neither famine or war, envy or competition, for good will flow in abundance, and all the delights will be freely available as dust. So yes, this world will be made a paradise. This world will be good because we already have the power to do that. We just haven't chosen to do that yet, which is why we're still waiting for a Messiah to help show us how we can choose to do it the right way, and everyone else along with us, because we're not quite there yet. All right, that's it for tonight. Like I said, this is only the tiniest little bit, and there's much more to learn and learn and understand. As Rambam said, don't let this be your focus. Right? Your focus should be on your own soul, on your own journey. And what happens at the end, we're all going to get there one way or another, and we'll figure it out together when we're there.